If you were a woman in ancient Egypt and you wanted to not have a baby, the plan on the table could genuinely kill you. Not statistically, not eventually, directly, and sometimes within days. We start tonight in a clinic room at Kahun, around 1800 BCE, with a physician mixing something that includes crocodile dung. And we end with the one recipe, out of dozens on record, that historians now believe was the deadliest thing an Egyptian woman could put inside her own body, and the reason she used it anyway. Along the way, a fermented acacia gum pessary that modern chemists actually tested in a lab and found genuinely works. A honey and natron plug that may have done almost nothing at all. A fumigation treatment involving substances so caustic they could scar you from the inside out. And the quiet detective work that tells us which recipes were real medicine and which ones were a coin flip with a woman's life. Let's go. Here's the thing. Nobody tells you about Egyptian medicine. It wasn't guesswork dressed up in spells. The Kahun Papyrus, around 1800 BCE, and the Ebers Papyrus, roughly 3 centuries later, are structured like real clinical documents. Symptom, then treatment, then dosage. These are the oldest known written contraceptive prescriptions in human history, predating anything from Greece or Rome by well over 1,000 years. But structured like medicine doesn't mean it worked like medicine. And that gap between confident and correct is exactly where the danger was hiding. The Kahun Papyrus survives because a British excavator named Flinders Petrie found it in 1889, in the same town where laborers once lived to build a pyramid complex for Senusret II. Half of it crumbled to nothing before anyone could read it, but what's left includes at least 3 separate contraceptive formulas written out for a physician to actually use. 3. On one document. Which tells you this wasn't rare or shameful, it was a documented medical service. The real question is what happened to the woman once she walked out with the prescription in hand. Formula 1, crocodile dung mixed with a soured, fermented liquid, shaped into a pessary and inserted before intercourse. It sounds like a punchline. It isn't entirely one. Dung is dense and alkaline, and some historians think this was less magic and more mechanics. A crude barrier plugging the cervix, a diaphragm made from whatever was on hand along a river full of crocodiles, but an alkaline plug is only half a contraceptive. The other half is whatever else you're introducing into the body along with it. And that's where the cleverness runs out. Crocodile dung is not sterile. It's animal waste, packed with bacteria, sitting inside the body for hours at human temperature, close to a perfect incubator for infection. Tetanus, sepsis, an abscess, a Bronze Age physician had no real way to treat. So the actual trade being made wasn't pregnancy versus no pregnancy. It was pregnancy versus a serious, sometimes fatal infection, with no guarantee the dung even stopped conception in the first place. But not every recipe on that same papyrus carried that risk. One of them, strangely, might have actually worked. Formula 2 calls for fermented acacia gum, mixed with dates and honey, inserted the same way. Here's the part that should surprise you. In the 1930s, a researcher testing plant-based spermicides found that fermented acacia produces lactic acid as a byproduct, the same active ingredient still used in some modern spermicidal gels. Lab tests on this exact recipe showed it actually immobilized sperm, which means around 1800 BCE, with no microscope and no concept of a sperm cell, an Egyptian physician landed on functioning contraceptive chemistry. Hold on to that contrast. It matters enormously for what's coming. Formula 3 is honey and natron, packed the same way. This is the one historians are least confident about. Honey is mildly antibacterial, which is something. Natron is a drying salt. Neither reliably stops sperm, and some researchers suspect this formula did almost nothing except make the patient feel like she'd done something. 3 recipes, 1 prescription pad. 1 is dangerous. 1 might genuinely work. 1 is closer to a placebo. And a woman walking into that clinic had absolutely no way to know which was which. Now move 3 centuries forward to the Ebers Papyrus, and the recipes get bolder and more dangerous. Some prescriptions here go past blocking pregnancy entirely and into ending one already underway, using plants that were also, separately, documented poisons elsewhere in the same text. Fermented substances appear constantly because fermentation was one of the only tools Egyptians had to concentrate a plant's active compounds. But concentrating the compound that helps also concentrates the compound that harms. There's no dosage chart here, No body weight adjustment. There is a recipe, and there is a hope. See it claimed online that Egyptian women also used silphium, the famous contraceptive plant the Greeks and Romans harvested into extinction. That's almost certainly a mix-up. Silphium grew near Cyrene in North Africa, not the Nile Valley, and it never once appears in an Egyptian medical papyrus. It's a good story wearing the wrong country's name tag. What Egypt actually had on file was messier, more local, and in more than one case, considerably more dangerous than a plant that simply ran out. The genuinely frightening entries aren't the pessaries at all. They're the fumigations, treatments where a woman sat over a heated mixture and let the vapor do the work internally. Translated ingredients from the Ebers Papyrus include compounds a modern toxicologist would flag immediately, capable of burning tissue on contact and absorbing straight into the bloodstream with repeated use. And some regimens called for repeating the fumigation over several days. Every single repetition was another roll of the dice. This is where our two threads finally meet. The acacia pessary, the one modern chemistry actually validated, stayed outside the body's internal chemistry and simply blocked the door. The fumigations went the opposite way, straight inside, mixing with soft tissue and blood, with zero control over the dose. Which means the deadliest gamble in the entire Egyptian contraceptive record was never the crocodile dung everyone jokes about online. It was a treatment nobody memes about at all, because it stopped sounding funny the moment you know what was actually inside it. Several Ebers Papyrus recipes for inducing a miscarriage or preventing a birth call for what translators believe were lead-based minerals, heated, fumigated, absorbed directly through mucous membranes into the bloodstream. Lead doesn't ask permission. It accumulates. It can end a pregnancy, yes, sometimes, but it also causes kidney failure, seizures, and death, with no distinction between the pregnancy it stopped and the woman carrying it. This is the recipe historians now flag as the most likely cause of contraceptive deaths in the entire record. Not a joke about dung. A heavy metal, heated into vapor, and inhaled on purpose. Yet women used it. Not out of ignorance. The same papyrus lists safer options right beside it. It was used because sometimes the certainty of ending a pregnancy mattered more than the odds of surviving the method, and that calculation belonged entirely to her. 38 centuries before anyone would coin a modern word for that kind of choice. The gamble was real. So was the reason people kept taking it. That's where the trail runs cold in the record we have. A civilization that could diagnose and prescribe with startling precision, and still hand a patient a treatment with no way to weigh how much would help her against how much would kill her. If you want another story like this one, the next video is already sitting right there on your screen. Go ahead and press play.